super late.
We can talk, there's some points in here we can talk about ahead of time. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with our workshop with the Board of Commissioners and City of Ormy held today, Thursday, November 21st, 2024 at 4 p.m. here in the Commissioners' Chambers of the Municipal Building. Number one, review and discuss UDC and all matters related thereto. I think actually it's ODC. So before Brandon gets here, it was. Last time there were some blanks that we wanted to figure out with the parks. So let's go ahead and talk about that. There's still a blank in here. The first one was 6.04. And when Brandon gets here, we'll go through it from top to bottom, but there's some things we need to fill in.
All right. Number I gave him today, based on a very informal evaluation and opinion, was a max valuation of the land at like 50,000 an acre. And I thought that was pushing.
So that's a 6.8. Well, let's go back to 6.04 first, because this is new. I don't think we had this last time. I know we mentioned it, we talked about it. So this is saying,
the actual number of acres.
yeah. So like when somebody comes in with a development, like they would need to do one of a couple things, either dedicate land for a park, they can pay us a fee for the park, and we can improve our own, and then they don't give us land. Or if they give us land, this determines how much land needs to be dedicated for a park. And so last time we were trying to figure out the math to figure out like how many residents we have versus this acreage, to figure out what this number is. And so is that where we got the 3
Yeah, I think that's how much land we measured it.
Yeah. What I don't really get is this equation. So it's so the first one says the amount of land required to be dedicated for parkland shall be calculated at a rate not less than 3.27 acres of parkland per 1,000 ultimate residents. But then down here, it has 3.27 times number of units times persons per unit. Isn't that just the same as number of persons? Okay. Then divided by 1,000.
So that gives you acres.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a scenario. So let's say somebody wants to come in. Let's give me a scenario.
The one over there?
Sure, just for a scenario.
I know, so like 1,700 houses.
Okay.
Do you know the acres on top of your head?
Well, I just need units, and then let's say it's 2 people per unit.
I'd say 4, probably 3 to 4.
What's it 3? Oh, it says how do we figure out 2 persons? So if it's 10 plus dwelling units, then we're going to say 2 persons per unit according to this, right?
So 3,400 people.
So 3.27 times 1,700 units times 2 people per is 11,000 divided by 1,000.
It's 11 acres.
So that's 11.8 acres. 11.118 acres. Okay, so that seems to make sense. Yeah, that doesn't seem too much or too little.
I mean, because that's the amount we have now, so.
What's the total acreage over there being developed?
We can't. The Verstock farm? I don't know off the top of my head.
500-600.
450 something.
Okay.
And is that 1,700 for 450 just for this scenario?
So I think it's 1,700 and then a 300 unit apartment complex.
Okay, so the majority of the acreage. So 450 acres or so. This would be like a very small percentage.
Yeah, they're not gonna even be subject to this.
Right. It's just like-
It's most reasonable thing.
Okay. Do you know how that compares to any other cities? I've never
I
come
think
across
this is
that.
I think this is like Texas A&M between or parts.
I was curious, the 3.25, 2.7.
Well, that's what you have.
Right.
You can't require
I
more
get
than you
that.
have.
I know, I just wondered if it's too much or too little. I don't think it doesn't seem too much to me. But there are requirements in here, like they can't dedicate floodplain land to meet this requirement. It's gotta be specific, like good land, right? It can't be, so 6.06 criteria for parkland dedication. So number 3C, floodway or floodplain. It's unsuitable. I like the intent of this, I just don't want to do something that's gonna make certain projects less attractive to be done.
Okay, so just San Antonio says required parkland acres per dwelling. For general resident, low density residential is 1 acre per 70 dwellings.
So they have to have 1 acre apart for every 70 houses.
Well, that's way more.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is more attractive from the developer, I would assume.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Does it allow for floodplain?
Well, I know we can build parks, like the city
Right.
can put parks in floodplains.
But not to meet this. So like of what they'd be required. It could be next to a floodplain and include like 20 acres, even though they're only dedicated for.
That makes
But
sense.
it at least has to meet the minimum outside the floodplain. Is how I read it. So if a developer was gonna build 3.5 units per acre, I'm just pulling out a number, I don't know, so if it's 3.5 units per acre, they have to give us, say, per acre, if their margin is, say, 20,000 a lot, 65,000 an acre.
San Antonio will sometimes allow you to put your park in a floodplain. Because.
I don't have a problem with it.
I know.
I don't have a problem with creating a floodplain.
They're not really use it for anything else anyway. Might as well improve it.
It's one of the things we can do with floodplain. There's not a whole lot we can do with them, so.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I thought too. Something early on when I read that, I talked to Brandon about, we can talk to Brandon about that.
Okay.
What do you have a preference if parks are in the floodplain or not?
You can build in a floodplain.
A
We
park.
can put a park in a
Because I
floodplain.
checked,
We
I
just
checked it
can't
out
put
with San
a
Antonio River Authority. And they said you can build, but you have to let them check it out.
Yeah.
To see if it's not gonna mess
Because I
anything up.
know in San Antonio, a lot of the parks that are all connected with the trails are all floodplain anyway.
Right, but were they city done or developers? Their parks?
I'll never say.
So as it is now, the only parkland that would be dedicated in that scenario can't be in the floodplain, because this is written. So, I like the idea of it,
Because then that might give us more floodplain.
that's what I'm saying. Because there's areas.
They can't
where-
do anything else with it.
Right, might as well dedicate it to us. There's also requirements in here as far as like where the park can be based on the road. Where is
Is
that?
that like the pocket park thing?
Yeah.
Is that 7.4?
Maybe he removed that. I thought there was a requirement for the parks fee on certain roads. Like, I'll ask him about that. Like it could be X amount of road, X amount of feet away from like the main entrance, or like a regional road or something like that. Maybe.
I think there's, maybe in the types of parks, it defines. What different types of parks are.
This doesn't require certain type. This is way simpler though than the first one, like last time. Seems like it's really. Design and location. Park shall be designed and located based open or more based open or more of the park type specified in 6.03. But it doesn't require certain types of parks, does it? No. Okay, no, it doesn't. All right, and the next one we'll talk about is the fee. So, Jacob, you're saying it's 6.08. So I take this, so they come in, they're doing a big development, they either need to dedicate land for a park, or on our discretion, I believe, they can pay us a fee for us to improve the park.
Yeah, like rather than putting in a eighth of an acre parcel of park, that's when we would say, just pay us a fee instead.
So they can pay us the fee based on the park land fee in lieu amount shall be equivalent to the fair market value of platted land to be developed for residential uses that would otherwise be dedicated and paid to the city's park. So that would mean the acreage we calculate in that last equation.
So the $50,000?
Yeah, $50,000 per acre, so we use that.
So if we, that's scratched out here, the price per acre. It says fair market value of land that is developed for single family use that would otherwise be required to be dedicated. So under C.
So whatever they're buying.
Or you can call in an appraisal if they get their own appraisal, if they disagree, I like that.
Brandon didn't like my number.
Yeah, he took it out completely. Then, when instead of, okay, so then I guess the question, so instead of dedicating the land, they can pay the fee for the land instead, but then they also have to give us a development fee to build our park. Is that 608? So what's
So we get the land.
Yeah, so like if they're not going to do their own park and dedicate it, then we get money instead.
But it's two pieces of money. It's the land, so they're not dedicating land, so they're gonna give us the fee in 6.07
And then.
and 6.08 to approve our own park. And so that's the number. I think we were gonna look at the total cost divided by our people. We figure that out.
So,
Yeah, she sent us everything. I don't know why we didn't put this in here.
because Ida didn't get back to him He talked to her, but she hadn't gotten back to him, but.
Okay.
Let me see.
Cool, so you got those numbers.
Yeah, it's like 130,000-ish.
The improvements,
I think, no, that's enough, yes.
I mean, can we do a rough guess? Because,
We might have it, we're gonna consider it at the meeting.
yeah. So I don't know how much the basketball court costs. I would say that slab's probably.
When they do
Say
that.
it's probably $50,000 for that slab. I don't know.
That makes sense.
I would say it's at least $50,000 for that slab. And then, the playground equipment, probably 25,000. It's probably more than 25,000, but.
The trails, they did that recently.
So the trail invoice I've seen for 25,000. The picnic tables, pergolas, that was 12,000. The solar shades were 35, the solar lights were 7, the outdoor fitness equipment was 8,000. The basketball goals, both of them together, was 7,000.
Okay.
That playground equipment, I would say is at least $40,000,
At least.
if not 50.
You said 25, I thought it's more.
For the playground equipment?
Yeah. I've looked at like, I was like.
So have I.
50 grand.
Yeah.
You're way more.
Like if we had to replace it, it would probably be at least 50 grand.
So that's at least, let's say at least 150,000.
Does that seem fair, y'all?
That's what it costs our park.
160?
150, just going quick math off of our numbers.
Yeah, that's a bit my best estimates.
Alright, then we have 1,000 people. So, 1,500 per person.
And then I don't know what it costs for the ridge crest
Insurance.
to meet that.
Oh, yeah, that was. Well, it was the fencing.
Well, the asphalt's not cheap.
Yeah. That's $150. $150 a person, what we're estimating this park has cost us. So how does that work? Park development fee methodology, park development fee is based on city's cost per person development of the park, which is $150 per person. This estimate is based on input cost on the existing level service cost per person.
So the total cost for our park is.
I've never seen it.
Persons per developed park.
Okay, then it goes to the park and development fee calculation. So I guess that would be for 3 people per
So
unit.
that's based on density.
Yeah, it'd be 450. So 2.7 people per unit times 150. So it'd be, oh, sorry. So it'd be 405, and C would be 300. Okay, so let's go back to one of those scenarios. So if somebody came in and say they needed to dedicate 11 acres of land, but they don't want to develop the land, we want to take the fee, so say it's 20,000 an acre. Instead of dedicating land to build a park there, they're gonna give us, $200,000. Plus, how many people? We said 3,400 people. That's $1 million.
What is it?
It's $1 million. Can you look up some?
All right, hang on.
Make sure to-
So give me the list of our neighborhood park cost. We said 150,000,
Yeah, for 1,000 people.
and we only have 1,000 people here, I thought we were 1,200.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can round up.
Oh,
It's like 11.
Sorry, so late. It's
It's okay, jump in.
gonna be an hour and 15 minutes to get here from 1604 and 910.
I got stuck in that yesterday.
Well, we got something going on up here.
I had to come on Somerset Road. And it was worse.
We say 1,100 people.
136.
That's 136. We got started talking about some of the blanks, so we're talking about the parkland.
Yes.
Dedication.
Yep.
And then we'll start at the top and then just breeze through. We've got a few questions, but nothing.
Sounds good.
I like it. I mean, it's tight.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, we got with Ida, she's still working on some of that, so,
No issue.
I think you guys, y'all could approve it with the condition that, per the city engineer determining, the estimated, cost of the parkland improvements. And then, we could bring that number back in the next council meeting, let you know.
That's what we're talking about now.
Yeah,
We just rough guesstimated 150,000 in improvements.
Yeah, just based on what we know, divided by the number of people, that got us to 136, but then I was running a scenario of a big developer coming through, and then plugging it into the 10 plus units per acre at 2 people per unit was $1 million.
yeah,
So it's a big number.
yeah,
Maybe it's a little too big.
yeah, it should, let me see. Yeah, do that formula.
Maybe there should be a cap.
Well, I think, let me see. This is, when I did,
Well, they're not going, so this is if they're not going to put a park in.
Right.
But if you've got a big developer with a lot of land to play with,
They
they're more likely to donate or put land in as a park.
so you guys got, so y'all, what was it you had? I'm gonna do this little formula here for myself. So 150,000,
We're saying 1,100 people.
1,100 people.
Which I think is light, but that's the last census. Last census was like 1,056.
Voting the public.
That's 150.
So 150,000 divided by 1,000 is 15, right? 15.
150.
100, yeah.
But then we changed it to 1,100, so just slightly over to get to 136.
Yeah, so $150 per person, yeah. So, yeah, so if you had, development, we got 1,500 people times 150. Well, I got, so if you had 100, say if you had a development with 1,500 people, that'd be 225,000.
How many people would that be on our, how many acreage would that be in this sort of calculation? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, the way we're reading it, if they decide not to dedicate land,
Yep.
then they're paying us the equivalent of the land that they should have dedicated,
Right.
plus an improvement fee to our.
Exactly.
So then how big is that? So how many did you just say? 1,500 people?
15, yeah, say you had well, let's say, actually, let's just be more, you have a development with 1,500 homes and 1,500 single-family homes. And so using the matrix here, if you've got, just calculated based on expected persons per unit, consistent, so it's 150. So yeah, it's 150 per person. And so if you have, say it's a single family subdivision, because if you go to the next part, which is 2, which is talking about estimating dwelling units per acre. So
Right.
So yeah, so when they do the calculation, you'll divide, you look at how many how many acres divided by the number of dwelling units, and whatever number you come up with, if it's say like 5 units per acre, then you say, okay, so there's gonna be 3 people per house. And so say you have 1,500 units, you would multiply 1,500 times 3, and then multiply that by 150.
Well, I thought that's what this was saying, if it's more than 10 units, then we're assuming 2 persons per unit.
Exactly.
You just have 3 people per unit.
Well, I'm saying, say if the density was 5 units per acre. So like.
Oh, that's per acre?
Yeah. So a typical, like say the Lennar subdivision that's gonna go, and that's gonna probably be 4 to 5 units per acre.
Oh.
And so, because they're single family, so if it's 4 to 5 units per acre, then you'll assume that there's gonna be 3, because typically the higher the density, usually the less people, like an apartment complex is gonna have like 25, 30 units per acre, a lot of 24 units per acre. You don't have all 3-bedroom units, right? You're gonna have some 1-bedrooms, so the average persons per unit in an apartment complex is gonna be about 2. So that's why the number of people goes down the higher density that you get. But yeah, so say a typical single family subdivision is gonna go in, it's gonna be 5 people per acre, or 5 units per acre. And so with 3 people, so yeah, you'd have 1,500 times 3, and then multiply that times 150. 1,500 times 3 times 150. So it'd be 675. And that's it. I think those are numbers that I'm used to. If they decided not to build their park, but realistically, they're probably gonna build their neighborhood amenity park, and they'll frankly probably spend a lot more than that on it. And so that's still an option that they have. So they have the option to do fee in lieu and to do the development fee in lieu, and they also still have the option in terms of we have these numbers established. They can build their own neighborhood park, and if they can demonstrate that they spent more than that, then they don't have to give us anything. They just build their own park, and it's assumed that people are going to use that park because they'll most likely have the same amenities that you guys have over here. And that sort of completes the idea, is that since they have their own amenities, they're not lowering the level of service of this park. This place is packed and kids have to wait 10 minutes to get on a swing.
So hang on, so if it's 0 to 6 dwelling units per acre, 3 people per unit, then we're saying the fee is $150 per person. So it's $450 per unit.
Right.
Okay. It's not. So 1,500, so acre. 675,000.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. So for A it'd be 450, and then for B it'd be 150 times
2.745. And then so they would have to pay that plus the land dedication.
Right.
Basically the fair market value of land that is developable for single family use. So like right now, what, 20,000, 30,000 acre.
That's what Jacob, I think you proposed 30 to 40, and I was like, really? And we talked about 50, but yeah.
50 with utilities, and like ready to go, I would think.
Okay.
It's like a paper lot, 20,000, so 60,000. It's not a title, it's raw land, we're talking, I'd say 20, 30,000.
This is what city use right now, zone, so we would rezone it ourselves before
Probably.
selling it.
But we would determine that, I guess, right? Like we would say, they give it to us, like, all right, we want fee in lieu, and we're like, all right, then this is what our number is.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, that's silly, we're gonna appraisal, they get an appraisal, and we're like, whoa, that's not right. She goes get some appraisal, and then we decide which appraisal we go to.
Yeah.
That's how I read that, right? At the direction of the board, is that what that last I of C under 607 means?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so we can choose which appraisal, and that's the C.
exactly.
That still seems kind of rich. What was the number you got with cities?
For one acre or 70 dwelling units. 1 acre of parkland per 70 dwelling units.
So ours is,
Dwelling units per acre.
ours is just, ours is based on, the number is calculated by looking at how many acres of park do you have currently. And so, yeah,
But do they include, develop the,
Which one would you?
yeah, so that ours is more attractive. What about, do they do the parkland development fee in addition to the land dedication?
They do.
I'd be curious, okay. Do you know what it is? I'd be curious just to consider.
I know it's really north, but, look at Wolverine, they have this exact same language there, because I wrote it when I was there.
Okay, in lieu of dedication of required parkland, amount of land required for dedication times fair market value plus the average development cost equals the number of dollars to be paid in.
So it's the same.
Yeah, so amount of land required for dedication, fair market value of the property to be subdivided, and then average development cost.
Do they they don't specify the fee, the cost to develop? Okay. We can always update this later.
Yeah, so,
So for now, we can go with the 136, if we have 1,100 people. Right?
yeah.
Maybe that's not gonna happen.
Yeah. We have 1,100 people, so we were going with 1,000 people, we do it more than that. This is like 1,056, I think is the last census. We want to get specific with it.
Yeah, so Wolverine, they've got 5.5 acres of parkland for 1,000. You got a big park. They have.
Okay, the other thing, when we were talking, priority comes, so we've talked about the fees, I think all that makes sense. We're attracting to San Antonio, so at least we get something, but we'd be more attractive in San Antonio if developers looking at it, I like that. And we still get something we don't get currently. But since we're on parks, let's finish this chapter 606, criteria for parking dedication. Number 1, Brandon, design and location, park shall be designed and located base, open, or more of the park types. I think this would be a font.
Oh,
1 or more.
yes, that should be, yes. That should be based on one.
And then I remember when in your first draft, I thought there was requirements of like placement of parks for distance to roads. Is that not in here anymore?
It is.
I know you have that like the different types of parks.
Yeah.
But nowhere else does it say what types of parks you have to have. It just says you have to have these parks. I like it. Don't get me wrong. I just wanted to say.
It should be at the very beginning under types of parks. So I may have switched that up. So yeah, if you look at types of parks, that's where it talks about each one and, it talks about the dimensions of them, community park shall be no less than 5 acres and located no more further than 2 miles from any proposed residential lot. Green neighborhood parks, which is what we're gonna get with development. Is that kind of what you're thinking, or?
Yeah, but this is less restrictive. And so nowhere in here though, does it say a specific development has to be one of these parks that indicates like where it is. Like as a developer, they can come in and they could pick the combination of these to serve their purpose.
Yeah.
Right? They don't, like, it's up to them to show, hey, here's my park plan, it's gonna meet these requirements as far as land dedication.
Right, so yeah, based on section 606, they shall be designed and located based on one or the park type. So it does give them the ability, they have a certain amount of park land that they have to have. And so they have the ability to combine and say, well, we can do a neighborhood park, we can do a green, we can do a pocket park. And so as long as they hit that park number. And so it gives them a little bit of flexibility in the design of their open space and their parkland dedication.
I like this.
Cool. Yeah, I think,
There's a lot of flexibility.
yeah, as a designer myself, it's land that sometimes you don't have like a huge flat piece or a huge place to have a big park. You want to have a series of more narrow linear parks or things like that. So yeah.
Okay, one thing we talked about before we got here was the under 606 criteria for parking dedicated unsuitable land, floodway or floodplain. And what we thought that Carla brought up that some of the bigger parks do have a floodplain. I noticed the intent of this is not for them to be able to come and dedicate only their floodplain. But you can still build a park in the floodplain. Do you have feedback from Brandon on that? Or do you want to talk through the reasoning? I know we've talked about it before.
Yeah, and I think, floodway, floodplain, those are, based on our floodplain requirements that we have, that there's limited changes that you can put in there. So, and so you could, there's difference between, open space and parkland. Per the definition of this parkland it's not a lot, it's not huge. And so the idea behind this is that, areas that aren't really suitable for any kind of development, we're wanting to preserve those and conserve those areas and not have them be developed for any kind of like active uses, the idea is to keep impervious coverage out of the floodplain, like tennis courts or any kind of, paved areas, any kind of parking lots or stuff like that. So the idea is to keep the floodplains natural and frankly, just being totally straight up, it really, if you don't allow developers to dedicate their parkland or their floodplain for parkland, then, they're more likely to say, hey, maybe we will go ahead and do a feed loop and then put that into the park system. So it's really, it's got a lot of meanings. Number one, there's the environmental meaning, or the environmental purpose, which is really kind of protecting the floodplains and in the floodways, and also, just kind of controlling density and making sure that things are, you're conserving as much of the more sensitive land as possible.
What we don't want to do is de-incentivize dedication of more than the requirements. So like
Right.
trail network systems, like a lot of Costa or San Antonio's parks are in the floodplain.
Yeah.
I'm sure I don't know how many of those would be developer built versus city built.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, so like trails is a park dedicated land. Would a parking lot and playground next to a floodplain, still constitute for their dedication requirement, and then they can build a trail system?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, you know, maybe.
So with the parking lot that supports the
Yeah.
trail system?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, you know, we've got trail listed as one of the parks, so maybe we put an exception that, only parkland, unsuitable land, floodway and floodplain is unsuitable for any kind of park other than a trail.
Yeah.
You wanna do that? I think that's totally reasonable, that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah. Floodplain and floodplain for any type of park other than a trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would think it would still make it big.
Cool. I like that.
It's freezing in here. I think it's just the way it's been.
Air coming.
Okay, now I think we've hit all the parks. Do we have any other comments on parks? Brandon?
No,
Let's go back to 5. Yeah, chapter 5, just had one question.
Any more? Question I want for y'all's shredder.
So what, my question on 5 is, what, like, it didn't make sense is like, or what I just wanted you to explain to me, so somebody comes, it's talking about in dedication 5.04B. Where's the trigger to requiring this?
The time of lighting.
But like, who sets that? Like, how is it set? Does it just say all buffer zones?
The engineer does. So the buffer zones are established by a drainage analysis. And so when a developer comes in, this requirement says, right now it says you're required to dedicate a buffer on either side of a natural water course, 60 feet on either side of the center line of a protected water course. And a protected water course is any water course draining more than 60 acres. And so when there's a developer that has a large, this is something that's going to apply to large scale types of developments typically. And so anytime you have a water course, which is just a drainage way, a natural drainage way, when a developer sets out to have their project, they hire a civil engineer that specializes in hydrology, and they look at watersheds and sub-watersheds. Every single piece of property has got, veins going through it and veins that come. It's just like the human body, where you got all these veins where water naturally runs, right? And so when you look at those water courses, you look at the watershed that drains into it, and if it's larger than 60 acres, then that's what kind of designates that watershed. And so they'll say, all right, yeah, this one's got more than 60 acres, we're going to keep that one. The code requires that the developer incorporate that existing water course into their development. Or in some of the watersheds, there'll be less, and then they can potentially change those. And so the idea behind water course protection is, number one, there's a water quality aspect to it too, because when water is draining naturally, like
Yeah,
water,
I'm not so concerned with that. I'm just like, how is this actually used?
how's it applied?
So like it talks about, like how's it apply? So we already have the drainage pieces that we got to pass. Is this just supplementing the drainage study that they're already required to do?
No, it'll be something that they have to look at when they do their drainage study.
Right,
So-
a piece to the drainage that we already have on the books.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're required to do a drainage analysis, and everybody's required to do a drainage analysis, and the key behind a drainage analysis, as you know, is you have to show that not only are you finding a way to accommodate the water that's coming to you, and you can still let that water go, the water that you receive, but what are you doing with the water that you generate? And so the idea behind this is that you identify those existing water courses and you maintain them to continue to convey water through the site rather than, and so that's a part of the drainage analysis you have to demonstrate, how
Does that
you're.
go into the stormwater later?
What's that?
Does that go into the stormwater as well?
It does, it's a part of it, but this is a specific chapter that deals with the existing water courses and maintaining them.
And then, so it says shall assign a responsible party. So is that something like they're dedicated to us to maintain? Or are they dedicated to an HOA? And
It'll be part of their HOA, so it'll be part of the open space.
What about if there isn't an HOA?
Well, I mean, if they have to, if it's like a smaller piece of land, is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, for a large scale development, yeah, it would always, we require it to go to an HOA. It would have to be part of their open space. But if it's a smaller development, then, say it's like a 10-acre piece of land, if somebody, creates, 2-acre lots or something like that, yeah, they'd have to put this on the plat and they wouldn't be able to build in it, and it would be on their property, they'd have to maintain it. It's kind of like a setback. It's pretty much exactly the same as a setback.
Okay, and I just approve this one?
Yes,
Yeah.
she reviewed it.
Okay, those are my questions. There.
Cool. Yeah, I hope it's
Not
the
sure how
idea.
that applies here, though.
Well, the idea is that, you look around at all these cities, you look at Houston, you look at, Bulverde, where I worked, this is a place, Bulverde was actually, I'm a big advocate for this, obviously, I wrote this language, a lot, similar aspects of it years ago. And the whole idea is, number one is water quality. We've got a pretty serious water quality issue around here, with properties draining into the, river watershed. So the idea is that if you're requiring natural drainage paths, which is just little crevices in the earth, these little veins that go through, if you're requiring those to be maintained, in lieu of allowing developers to just scrape the site flat and basically have all the water go into streets, there's no way to really treat that, because, the typical standard, if you don't have something like this, is all of the water goes into the streets, it picks up all the pollutants on the streets, and it all gets conveyed to a detention pond. And right before you get to the detention pond, you're usually gonna have like a water quality treatment area that treats about the first inch of water. But the velocity of that water is so much faster, it just passes right over. So that's how you can only get about the first inch treated. That's typically, I think, what TCQ requires. I can't remember what the minimum requirement is. And so the idea of this is, if you're preserving those natural water courses, nobody knows how to drain water better than Mother Nature, right? I mean, engineers, as much as they'd like to, you can never guess where water's going to drop. But I've had some of the most qualified engineers in Texas tell me there's a 30% margin for error on drainage, because you never know where the water's going to drop. And so that's how we get cumulative flood issues like Houston and other places, because it just adds up. When you're channelizing water into the street, it's picking up, not only picking up speed, but it's picking up pollutants. And all that kind of adds up over time into some flood issues.
Does Houston not have that?
I don't know. I think they're doing it now.
San Antonio?
San Antonio doesn't have drainage protection zones. Smaller communities are doing it. Bernie, Bulverde, I think Castroville's looking at doing them. I highly recommend them to you guys. And like I've always said, there's a trade-off to this. My recommendation is, have these requirements to conserve the natural features of the site, because I recommend that, obviously, for the reasons I just mentioned. But allow developers, in return, you can't require lots of environmental concessions from developers without giving them something in return. So in return for conserving the natural features of the site and practicing what I call conservation subdivision design, you give developers more density. So allow more density in the areas where the property is totally viable for development.
But could this be something that, if it doesn't work for a specific site, that they could put in a planned development or planned district? Which we're not very good at.
They always have the option to ask for it.
Well, we're getting rid of the variances part of this, right?
Do what?
The intent of the overall code is to get rid of variances.
No, you still want to have variances.
Okay.
You still need to have variances, but variances, the idea of variances, under state law is when you have a legitimate hardship, you know, and I think that's why a PD district plan development district is nice, because it gives the developer the opportunity to show that, you know, in return for getting a variance for this, we're delivering something superior in this. They always have the option to ask for these water course, you know, protection zones to get relief from it. I have a hard time, you know, understanding why y'all would want to do that if they're still getting plenty of density. And really, the only reason I can think of for a developer to say, hey, you know, can you give me a break on this, is if they just can't develop the property, if you're literally taking the property. You know, and that is the case, but it really depends.
So do you know how any of this would apply here in the Army? Like maybe, like I could see like where stuff
I
goes
don't, do
into.
we have anything declared? Like, do we have anything that fits that?
Oh yeah, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you got water courses here that drain
Like
drain
Medina
over 60.
River.
I'm sure you've got some coming off the Medina River, and you've got large tracts of land, and, you know.
Draining into the Medina River.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know,
60 greater acres. Like on the other side of the railroad
Yeah.
tracks, that's where a lot of
I mean,
land is
even right
draining.
here, just south, okay, so this is just pulling up Google Maps. There's Baker Lake down there.
Yeah.
And so that whole drainage area
Yeah.
north of Baker Lake is gonna probably encompass more than 60 acres south of where we are right now.
if you look at, exactly, that's a perfect example of one.
So how would that apply? So they would need to ensure that there's right of way for everything on the north of Baker Lake.
Well, they'd have to provide a buffer around Baker Lake, and then, you know, I'm sure, I've looked at that property, there's some primary water courses draining into Baker Lake. And so they would have to incorporate that into their open space. They would have to, you know.
But they have to do that anyway, as part of their drainage mitigation plan, or their drainage website, right?
Well,
Also, it just requires, if that's dealing with impervious versus pervious cover, saying how much more runoff their development is going to cause.
it forces,
They mitigate for that.
Right.
This is saying we have to protect what's already there.
This is protecting existing waterways or existing drainage structures.
well, every project has a drainage plan. How are you going to convey the water? So what they're going to do is they're going to utilize the existing conveyance ways for their drainage conveyance systems. So they're not gonna have to build anything additional. It just requires them to use the naturally vegetated, non-pavement, you know, and if you don't have a requirement like this, what they're gonna do is they're gonna make it all concrete and probably channelize it into Baker Lake or wherever it goes. But in this case, it forces them to do a more natural, I don't want to use the word green because I hate that word, we all do, but yeah, it forces them to do a more natural approach. And it forces them to design their drainage in a certain way.
But San Antonio doesn't do it.
No, San Antonio does not do it. Most of the, or not most, but several of the surrounding urban communities are starting, or smaller communities are starting. It's recommended best practice, I recommend you guys, because it
But it
just.
says Texas Water Codes and TCQ, so it's all just according to their specifications.
No, so I put those codes down there, that's the authority by which y'all can adopt this. So in every chapter, you know, at the end of the day, you guys always have to have a state law that more or less authorizes you to pass the law before. And so zoning laws don't give you all the authority to do these things. And subdivision law doesn't give you the authority to do so, but the water code does, because, you know, this has to be adopted in the name of water quality and water quality protection, which is really one of the primary reasons for it.
Commissioner Houston, you had a question. Sorry, you had a question?
No, on this drainage, you have a pond or just go straight to river or creek?
Well, it depends. I mean, there's other provisions that we'll talk about in a minute, you know, the low impact provisions that are, you know, recommended for you guys. You know, it comes down, sorry, I'm a little low on sleep, so I feel like a broken typewriter talking here tonight. But you know, it really comes down to, in a lot of ways, the quality of the neighborhoods that you guys want in Von Army. You know, if you look to the north, you know, what they do is they take a piece of land, it may or may not be a beautiful piece of land, and they just scrape it. You know, San Antonio, God love it, I lived there my entire life. It is a developer-friendly city. You know, affordable housing, so-called, that's the name of the game. That's their goal. And so they have very loose development restrictions. And you drive up there and you look at these communities and you can see it. You know, they scrape the land, they scrape every single natural drainage feature off the land, typically, especially for the lower end subdivisions. They cut all the trees down and they just engineer it back. And so all of these natural features that have a water quality element, that actually have a water, that control water quantity the way it's always been done naturally, they scrape it all down. And then they just engineer it, and hopefully the engineering is good on it. And so there's the water quality component, there's the flood damage prevention component, because, you know, if you have a 30% margin for error, again and again, that kind of adds up. And frankly, you also have a quality component there too, because when you require developers to have more natural, frankly more, I mean, I think a natural water course that's vegetated is going to be a lot nicer than a concrete drainage channel that's full of algae all the time. And so you're requiring a higher end development.
We also have to compete with San Antonio for development. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, you know, I feel on that, where I'm like, I don't feel like those subdivisions are something to be fought and won for. You know, I think, you know, you guys, you know, when I recommend you guys, I recommend the long game. You know, I recommend the long game. What do y'all want this community to be like in 100 years? Really, that's what we're doing right here. We're talking about what's this community going to be like in 100 years. And if y'all want it to look like, you know, what we all drive through on the way here, that's what you're going to get without stuff like this, honestly, at least in my opinion.
My concern is the growth pattern just kill us. You know, growth is going to continue to be happening. If we can't get control of our utilities, we can't get the rooftops, we're not going to get the commercial, they're going to go to Lidl, they're going to get the cash control, they're going to keep going. If we can't figure that out. So that's my concern, doing something that makes us harder to build in compared to their other options here locally. It's one thing in, you know, up north where they got the low country, they've got different greenery. I mean, it's a totally different ballgame up there compared to we're competing with Somerset, you know, for projects. We're competing with Lidl, you know. That's what I think. I don't want to do something that's more constricted. It sounds like this is more constricted.
Oh, it totally is. I mean, it's totally more constricted, again, because
Let me know.
my recommendation is don't settle. Just be frank. I don't recommend you guys settle for the growth that's coming, because again, you look at what's up there. That's what you're going to get.
Like Alamo Ranch is all concreted in, all the drainage is concreted and all that, they're having massive flooding issues
Oh yeah.
with just little amounts of.
I was in Bulverde. The city was suing the muds. There were property owners suing the city. They're suing the muds because all the engineering, it just doesn't work. You know, the interim stakes of the engineering doesn't work, the long end. And so it really, in kind of in there, this is what we're getting into right now is we're getting into comprehensive planning kind of questions. What kind of community you guys want and how badly do you want to grow? That's really a question. How badly do you want to grow? Do you want to grow so badly that you're willing to have that stuff here for the next 100 years? Or do you want to look at more strategic ways to grow in your infrastructure than having to do it through getting that, which, you know, I don't know what that's, yeah. Anyway.
Okay, let's keep it. We talked about 5. We can talk about it more, unless anybody has any further thoughts on it. Before we go on, there's other chapters to this, correct?
Yeah.
So it's on the agenda today. It'd be great to get some of this on the books. I'm going to recommend at the meeting we can vote on it decide to wait on 5. Just based on this conversation, we talk about our land comprehensive planning. It's something it goes into a bigger conversation than some of these other things we can get on books.
You got the PDs though.
Yes.
So
that was my question earlier. You said no.
No, you guys are always at liberty. Okay, y'all are at liberty. So I'm speaking to you as your planner. Like I can't help but pretend that I would be your planning director making the recommendations. Okay, and so it's my job as your planner. If development comes in and it's one of these, you know, $225,000 subdivisions where every single house is going to look the same and they're going to scrape the side, and they want to get rid of the drainage protection zones,
Well,
I'm probably
they
gonna say,
have the leverage.
yeah, well, exactly, and I'm probably gonna say, hey, like, I don't recommend you do this, but you guys can always vote against it. You guys have before, and you probably will again, and but I wouldn't, but at least it's there. It's a negotiating
Does this
mechanism.
apply to TJ?
Yes.
Does the plan development district apply to TJ?
No, but they can always come to you with a development agreement.
We can use
Yeah.
development agreements outside, like in the ETJ, but the PDD is for inside zones.
But these regulations, that's what I'm saying, these regulations are leverage for you guys. If somebody wants to go out in your ETJ and they're following all of your rules, they don't have to be annexed. But this is a way to control your ETJ, because if you get, like, on our subdivision that's going on out here, or the DR Horton subdivision's going, if this stuff had have been here 3 months ago, they would have had to come to you guys for some sort of relief on this. And then you could have said, you know what, if we want relief, we want a development agreement, we're gonna annex you, and we want some commercial land. But they're able to comply with everything because it's so easy. And it would still be easy if you got rid of this after 5. But this gives you the ability to annex them and say, we want some commercial land, and then you're really working towards your stronger tax base, but just at least it's there as a form of leverage.
Okay, I get you there.
Yeah.
I think we need this.
Well, I think we need aspects of it. Yeah, we're talking through the different pieces of chapter 5 specifically. I do like that aspect.
Because sooner or later, we're gonna need it.
Yeah, we need this development code overall.
So how much longer do we have to discuss all this before it comes into?
Well, hopefully tonight, so let's keep moving through. So we talked about 6, like 6. We can decide on 5 at our meeting. So 5 is the, chapter 5, the water, wetland, water courses.
I like what you're giving us.
Yeah, I like the idea of leverage, given to the 2. Okay, let's go to 7. I didn't really have any specific comments on this. This has been the same pretty much,
Yeah.
and this is pretty much in line with most other cities. Right?
Sure.
It's cold, right? It's the air conditioner.
So much better.
No, it's the air conditioner.
Let's, your note on here that you added for curb and gutter, let's talk about that one, because it's stormwater. So on table 7.05, where it talks about the different types of roads, the kinds that need curb and gutter. So the neighborhood streets,
Yeah.
some of those don't need curb and gutter with the installation of an integrated stormwater facility,
Right.
which ditches and drainage.
Bioswales, a lot of the things that we talk about in the section. So yeah, it gives, and that's the thing that, I try to be a reasonable city planner because I work on the plan development side too. And something I hear a lot of developers griping about is they want to do more low impact kind of stuff, but if you have to do curb and gutter, it just really raises the cost. So if you have certain subdivisions, why can't you just do a rollover curb? Just, and save money, and instead of putting that money into concrete, put that money into something that actually has a water quality element. So that's why I put that. I think it's kind of an exception, that provides them more flexibility and not have to put in all these curbs and gutters and things. And so it gives them some flexibility to design some kind of low impact streets.
And then you added the HOA
Yes.
control, which was something I thought was important.
Does Ida have copies of this?
I'm sorry?
Ida, does she have?
Yes. Yeah, I did everything in here in purple is what Ida reviewed and what she had comments on. So yeah, she and her team looked at this.
Can you reread all this, Jacob?
I have,
If you were your wife, any specific comments on the streets?
no, the street portion was good, and I think we will bring an improvement to the quality of streets here.
Okay, blocks and lots, chapter 9.
There's a lot of exceptions in it too. I just want to reiterate that. For that's to me, number one, it's a big quality aspect, and number two, it's a big leverage aspect.
I just, out of curiosity here, so I'm looking at the largest square of straight residential here in Ormy. And so, and let's imagine that there was another north-south street between Benton City Road and Border Horse, connecting Ormy Road and Tennessee Walker. What would be the distance here on horse pistol and horseback of that block?
Well, this is gonna be for new development. When people are platting a large section of land, that's what it's gonna apply to. So for existing platted stuff, mom and pop aren't gonna have to
I'd be
dedicate.
curious what that is to compare to.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, like using that as a comparison.
I did use that as a comparison.
You did? Okay, all right.
So that's what this is.
That's what the.
Generally, yeah, I think there's like 900 feet, like between these huge collector, I mean, typically in a collector system, there's like 900 feet, so, I think I measured it out. So yeah, I took the existing stuff into consideration. Yeah, so if you got, it's 440 feet, so, I said you can extend it up to 930 feet, with an internal parking lot, if it's a commercial development, or if they put it in an alley or something like that. So there's ways to have relief, to have it be consistent with some of our existing block lengths right now.
What's the only thing I have on that one? And just making sure, I know it's at the very least leverage, but making sure y'all, the commissioners, would like to see a more block-oriented structure to future development, as opposed to just one winding road through a development.
But doesn't the perimeter come into play in that scenario?
Perimeter does too, right, and you get relief on the perimeter as well.
So like in this scenario, how would that work? So if it is, if whatever the topography doesn't allow for like a clear lot and block, maybe the floodplain goes in there and it does that too.
That's where the block, the definition of blocks comes in. So it says a block shall mean an area of land bounded entirely by one or more of the following. So you've got streets, you've got floodplain. So all these things can count as a side of a block. So you're not having to put an extra road in. That's the goal. Is having people put in unnecessary roads. And say you've got a property boundary or something that's already platted, and it's not gonna redevelop, and that counts as your blocking too. You just need to do your street stuff out for connectivity. That way all the traffic doesn't back up on community roads. The idea is to have more roads that people can drive on rather than having an hour 15-minute drive or get stuck on community roads on days of the month. So yeah. But yeah, there's plenty, in my opinion, there's plenty of relief, and it keeps KB and DR Horton from coming in here and just having these 2,000-foot long blocks, these 2,000-foot long streets where they've got like it's just such a
They would just be forced to put a connecting road.
Yeah, they put connections in there. That way the neighborhood's more walkable and you don't just have one street that cars are flying down. More sidewalks, and the smaller block things just create for a more human scale. You look at more traditional neighborhoods, there's more blocks in there, but now we're just trying to pack them in.
How many houses to a block?
How many houses to a block?
Block.
To a block.
It just depends on what their density is, if you, that's why there's different block sizes, if you've got, you've got smaller, let's see here.
So if it's 440 feet,
Right.
and say if they're 40 feet wide, that would be 11 homes per block.
Yeah.
And then they'd have them on the back side, so 22.
Then you have a street on each block.
Right. Yep. That's right.
If, and that's assuming that 40 is pretty small for a lot. So say it would be 65.
Because you do what, 150 by 50.
Yeah.
It just depends on the density of the neighborhood. So.
Maybe it's been, but it may go up to 930 internal parking lot street.
Yeah.
It's an internal parking lot street.
Or an alley. Well, for commercial development, you know, if you got a lot of these, you know, if you go to, if you go to Home Depot or you go to these other places, you know, large, big box developments, it's just a huge parking lot, right? Well, if they actually divide up their parking lot and landscape it and divide it up into actual parking sections and create an entry street that kind of actually seems like a street, then they're able to get an extension. They're able to have a larger block.
Well, how does that apply to our residential?
Well, with a residential, if they put it in an alley, then they can have a larger block.
Well, I thought we were just saying like the distance on, Tennessee Walker to Mid City Road is like 1,000 feet. I thought that's where that 930 came in.
Right.
But no, that goes, so we couldn't build one on Heights again.
Well, as long as I mean, it depends on, you know, you guys could put something in there, you know, we could put something in there for the zoning, or we could put something in there based on the density. That makes you guys feel better. That way we make sure it applies to, you know.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with Ormy Heights lots and blocks.
Yeah.
I mean, they're bigger than this.
So
That's walkable.
that's a good point. I mean, part of this honestly is, I had to change this because this was written to have the new zoning regulations in it. And so I had a carve out in there, like if you had an agricultural zoning district, which allows for the larger lots, then you wouldn't have to do the block length requirements. So the idea here is that we're hitting the smaller lot developments. And so I think that's a great point. You know, because we're not creating the ag district. So right now, you guys don't have a zoning district that's specifically for larger lots. You just have your residential zoning, which allows you to basically do, you know, the smaller lots. It also allows you to do larger lots. And so we could put something in there that says, you know, anything smaller than half acre lot or larger than a half acre lot is not subject to any residential development larger than half acre is not subject to the block length requirement. You guys could do that. That way, because how big are these lots over here?
Half acre or bigger.
There you go. So if you guys want to recreate that, which I totally agree, that makes sense. If somebody wants to do half acre, then let's put a carve out in here that says, put an exception for half acre lots, half acre and larger lots. They don't have to comply with the block length requirements.
Yeah, well, I wasn't, but that's a good point. I wasn't more thinking just I was just imagining, you know, Ormy Heights if it was quarter acre lots or something. You know, just that distance, we drive it all the time. So it seems okay to be in 440 is a third of that.
Right.
That seems pretty small.
Do you want to do a quarter acre then?
Well, if you would have a septic tank, that's no rule that you have to have at least half an acre.
Right.
Right, if it's on
If
septic.
it's on septic.
So half acre lots be okay, because they can put a septic tank on.
I mean, quarter acre, you know,
I'm trying to think once we have sewer though, and those types of
Yeah,
projects.
With more people, that would be an issue with more people in the same area, with more traffic. There's short, you don't think?
I don't know, I just like Ormy Heights.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
just
but imagine it with 20
twice the
people.
density.
I think quarter acre is as low as I would recommend you go. I mean, I'll be completely honest. I live on a 12,000 square foot lot, and my block is probably 1,000 people. You know, I mean, they're winding streets, and so you know, is it bad? No, I mean, do I love the blocks?
If there's
Yeah.
one way in and out of my parents' subdivision,
Yeah. What's
and
that?
it's like, there's one way in and out of my parents' subdivision, and it's like just long, and you just sit there.
And this will require the fire code, but
Well, I mean, yeah. Saying it backs up.
I wouldn't, you know, maybe this is a good interim. I think a key missing component here is a zoning code that works with what we're adopting. and where you have some zoning districts that these block links wouldn't apply to, but we don't have that yet. And so maybe, we just come up with a number that everybody, I think I would wholeheartedly recommend that these block link requirements apply to these 4,000 and 5,000 square foot lots that are being created, which is like a tenth of an acre, right? Totally recommend that, but quarter acre, yeah, maybe we set the cap at a quarter acre. Residential developments less than a quarter acre aren't subject to the block length requirement. But I would highly recommend you not allow them any smaller lots than that. Because again, the idea is quality of the neighborhood, connectivity.
Let's do a quarter then.
Okay.
I like this plan, I like them coming to the table, because that's one thing we haven't gotten. But I don't want it to not even get to the point, because they see something they just know doesn't work. Okay, let's go to stormwater. Oh, a question though, on blocks and lots, that was my biggest thing, was the block link maximum requirements. There's no lots. It starts about non-conforming lots.
Do what?
There's the block and lot, there's no lot. It's just blocks. Wasn't there a section on?
Yeah, there was.
It was like minimum 40-foot wide.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I accidentally struck that when I cleaned this out of the zoning stuff. You know what? I think I did that because your zoning code currently has that requirement in there. That's a zoning function, yes, thank you. I got rid of that because that's something that is done through zoning, and this would totally conflict with your current zoning code. And the requirement and the ability to regulate lot size is something given you by the zoning code. So if we had that in there, then it would technically be kind of a zoning thing. We'd have to do different modifications. Yeah. That's why it's not in there. So we'll come back to that when we do zoning. But your current zoning code regulates lot sizes and things like that.
Okay.
And setbacks.
The stormwater, chapter 10, stormwater. All of this is just really defining it. And it seems to me like the bulk of this, right, is 10.04, where it talks about the mitigation, so defining
Right.
everything above. And it says, here's what you gotta do.
Right.
Which is really just B, right? So like there's
Yeah, exactly.
10.4, there's A, again, talking about runoff. And 2 is runoff volume, defining it, and then there's B, showing runoff.
Yeah. This section is kind of like the park section where you're defining what the parks are like, and then it says, you have to do this, here's how much you have to do, and you have to do it for one of these types of low impact for these integrated facilities. So you have the water quality volume, this is a standard way to apply integrated or low impact facilities by looking at what is the rainfall, how many inches in a 24-hour rain event. And so you just go on to, I had an engineer let me know this. You go on to, I think it's TCQ. Or you want to know, I'm sorry, you want to know, and that'll tell you, and the rainfall for Ormy is, for a 24-hour rain event is 3 inches. And so, that's my recommendation. That's a standard. If you look at other communities like Bernie that just put this in, theirs is only like 2.35 because that's the rainfall they get. But it's typically a typical time this is through the 24-hour rainfall.
How does it compare to our existing ordinance?
You don't have anything like this.
Nothing that requires the runoff, water quality volume. treatment?
It's just standard, the minimum TCEQ requirements, which is.
Is this the minimum?
No, this isn't the minimum. TCEQ, right, what we have right now is just basically state law. TCEQ requires, I think, that the first inch be treated.
So yeah, so then now we're saying 3 inches.
Right. Yeah.
How does that compare to the San Antonio?
They have it in a few areas. They have it, I think there's 3. I met with Sarah and through Sarah, they helped me develop some of these too, just with some of their recommended best practices. So they have it mandatory in a few areas, but it's not required. Again, this is something that smaller municipalities are doing as a way to deal with growth. The growth that's coming towards them, they're seeing what San Antonio is doing, and they don't want that. So this is sort of part and parcel, similar to the water course protection. This is pushing a higher quality of design in the city. If you don't have something like this, developers are able to, channelize. The difference between integrated stormwater facilities and standard facilities, the water drops, you get it away from there, channelize it, speed it up, get it into a detention as fast as possible, and get it off the site. There's very limited water quality aspect to it. And then with this, low impact or integrated facilities are more focused on treating the water closer to the source. There's a water quality component. Of course, there's a water quantity. When I say water quantity component, I mean the water's not being channelized and sped up the way you have with traditional development going into streets and curbs and gutter. And of course, there's a quality aesthetic. Just the commercial development that you're going to get in particular is going to be a lot higher quality. You're not going to get everything on the south side, which. Well, you're Von. I would disagree. You're Von Ormy, not the south side. And you guys have the ability to do something. Yeah, but you guys have the ability, since you decided to become your own city. You all became this city because you didn't want to be San Antonio. And so that's why I'm making this recommendation to you, is that y'all have the potential to be a quality, even with the growth that's coming to you, you have the potential to be a quality community, a quality bedroom community, if you just require the developers to do this stuff.
Okay, so going from 1 inch to 3 inch, do you know what Somerset has?
They don't have anything. They don't have a regulation like this.
All right, the other one I have is 3, adequate treatment shall mean removal of at least 60% of exterior load and at least 80% of total suspends solids.
Yeah.
Is this really just for septic?
No, this is for stormwater. This is
How's that controlled? How's that not?
through the integrated facility itself, how it's designed. So these facilities are designed with. You can look at San Antonio River Authority's best practices. These facilities are designed to treat the water, and so this is where their engineers, these large scale developers, they hire engineering companies that have hydrologists that design this stuff, or landscape architects, depending on the scale of it. And so they design the facility to treat this water. And there's, I'm not one of them, but they've got, hydrological calculations and environmental calculations to look at. There's best practices. You use this type of soil, this type of compaction, this type of vegetation, and it meets that benchmark for providing that level of water quality. It all comes into the design of the facilities, and that's all stuff that I have been reviewing.
And she's already reviewed.
She's reviewed this. Yeah.
So we're trying to treat runoff water?
Treating a higher level of runoff water. And like I said, it's got a water quality aspect. It's got it controls the quantity of water. And you look at a facility that has a development that's got integrated facilities. It's going to be natural, it's going to trees, more vegetation, less concrete, higher quality, more tax revenue.
Okay, I just have one last question. On the Plain Development District, I haven't got another project after couldn't run on time, trying to take it right before our next meeting. Chapter 17, under D. Sorry, did anybody else have a question on stormwater? Sorry, skip that. On the last chapter, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Under Plan Development Districts, Chapter 17, D, Project Plan, under 3C, any development standards not required by the base zoning? That seems like an odd, just kind of statement.
Give me a second here.
So that's like where, let's say it's just like a general residential development, they're gonna enter into some sort of planning development district with us. And so we are gonna give some things and they're gonna give some things. And so if we are requiring standards relative to the residential district that are not generally a part
This is
of.
their mitigation, their idea to mitigate, to
Yes.
do something else that's not, I get it now. Okay. Okay. So I think.
Is 5 years standard?
Where are we again? With the
PDDs.
which section?
The last one, H, expiration,
Yes.
is 5 years standard for a plan approval.
Um,
I'm like, I'm gonna break ground sooner than that.
yeah, I mean, I think 5 years is, 5 years is pretty generous, honestly.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years is kind of a standard.
Yeah.
You guys
Because
are,
it's a plan base that they've submitted, we've approved that plan with all the conditions.
yeah,
About 5 years is very generous.
yeah. I mean,
Is there,
Is it too long? Cause then they can sit on it for 5 years and we've gone through everything and incurred costs and we're still waiting on them and then they've got 5 years to still decide whether they wanna move forward or not. Whereas if we put a short timeline on it, that may spur them into making it happen sooner. Otherwise, we're gonna have to come back and negotiate everything. Like we did with Versta, the first time with Otis.
but this one applied to the ETJ.
This is in the city limits.
a lot of times, when you have a developer out in ETJ and say they don't like the blocking requirements or there are certain water course protections that they don't like and they want to come talk to you guys, then y'all say, all right, we're not just gonna let you out of these requirements in our ETJ, let's talk. And so the mechanism for that is a development agreement. And typically, I can't imagine why you guys wouldn't want to say, yeah, we'll give you this relief, but we're gonna annex you and we want some commercial land. And by the way, the only way when you get annexed, the PD is gonna have to be the mechanism they're brought in. Because you can't annex and just give them variances through the development agreement itself. It has to be done through some sort of zoning mechanism. That way, they're in compliance with their zoning, and they only do this at PD. So a PD is totally gonna be something if somebody comes into the city, and it's probably gonna be the mechanism that they're zoned when they're annexed if they come into the ETJ. I mean, rarely does any large-scale development happen these days in a city without a plan development district. Maybe in San Antonio, because the regulations are so lean, but, smaller cities, everywhere, it's always done through a PD. And that's what PDs were designed for. Plan development districts are abused in a lot of cities, so your plan development district for churches and self-storage and so they get abused, but they were designed for large-scale developments, particularly large-scale residential and mixed-use developments. So, it'll be the tool that you're going to use for any development, whether it's coming in from ETJ or if it's in the city.
Any other questions? I think just a general, like specifically like chapters 5, 9, and 10, forcing to the table, because that's something we haven't gotten with some of the stuff going on in ETJ. And then there would be opportunities and forcing them to come to the table in which we can look at ideas, be creative, to help us and help them at the same time. I like that aspect. The general idea of the quality of development, I like high quality developments. My overall fear is this will be published, this will be online, and it would just detract those from even starting the conversation if it's too restrictive. And that's my concern with some of the stuff in 9 and 10. That's my concern. But I want to have a conversation with the developer. We've been trying, and frankly, with what we have now, we haven't really been getting any conversations.
So they can do without.
What to do without doing the conversation? So I guess that's the question. Like, would this force them to come, or would they just move on and go to
Well,
Lyle,
like if we'd had this, like diverse stuff, they would have had to come in.
or would they have passed on the next?
I don't think that.
I'll give y'all my opinion on this in terms of, having worked for cities and also working for developers. What stops developers from wanting to do business in a city, what gets you blacklisted is not your regulations, but how reasonable you are to deal with it, how reasonable your staff is, how reasonable your consultants are, and how reasonable you guys are. That's, take a place like Vernon, I'll just say it, it's my hometown. Nobody wants to develop in Vernon, and it's not because of the regulations. It's because of the council, it's because of the city manager, and it's because of the planning staff.
They said that at that class last night.
Yeah, it's the people. If they know this, because when you create regulations like this, what you're saying is we're either a hell of a community or we plan on being a hell of a community. And we have high standards for developing here. But what gets them to the table is how reasonable you guys are to work with. And that's what gets out. That's what gets out.
I
So
don't know, we don't really have much of a lot of
Yeah.
development in our community.
Exactly.
We still have the utilities to
Yeah.
support the development.
But
So
I
we
mean-
need to have these conversations,
Yeah.
that's like, so we need that partnership to solve utility
Right.
issues. And, I get the people piece,
Yeah.
and I think that's hugely important, but we're so new and so young, I don't know if anybody has a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah.
Or not, that to kind of set that tone, we want to have the door open.
on the flip side, if you're a community that everybody's like, oh, they don't have any standards, then you're gonna get, I'll tell you, you're gonna get a certain quality of development that maybe you don't want here. So in my experience, when developers have their eyes on a piece of property, and when I work for developers, I'm like, this is a doozy of a property. Geez, you got this same stuff, and already I've worked for developers up there, and it's a beautiful piece of property, and they want to go for it, because the council's relatively reasonable to deal with, or the staff is, so they start they start the discussion. It always, if the developer has got their eyes on a piece of property, and like, we can make a ton of money on this, and it's a beautiful piece of property, it's right in our target zone, the market's there, they're probably not gonna spend a lot of money, they're gonna come talk to you first. And that's what sets the tone. All of my experience, what sets the tone is that first meeting, when you go talk to the city. And if they basically say, if they run you off, or, they'll let you know if you have a general kind of idea of what you want to do. That's the stuff I hear from people I work with. Oh, they read me out, or they're impossible, and that guy was a jerk, or, they're difficult, and then that reputation adds up over time. But anyway. But yeah. Well, also, a lot of, I always encourage developers to come make a presentation to the council, and hear from you guys. Hey, we're interested in that, that's.
And we have the preliminary approval on the plat. Get that up there. I like the plan districts so much, because it allows for those two things kind of go at the same time.
Yeah. They, developers usually, like, when they start spending the big money, that's after they already have the zone where they know you guys are interested in the project. They're gonna hire somebody like me to do a site plan, and they're gonna come maybe float this high level site plan with you guys. Say, we're gonna get rid of these riparian buffers. Are y'all even willing to entertain it? There's no way else we can develop this property or whatever. So, I just don't think it's gonna fly with you guys, in my opinion.
Did we want to go back, for the planning district, we bring that up tonight, do we need to post?
Okay, we can't approve it tonight. Y'all can approve it as a form, and then we can do the public notice for y'all to approve it.
Just one.
We can do the PD district in 15 days.
We can do the zoning and stuff, the zoning commission and.
Right.
And is there a 30-day break between those? For the ordinance?
No,
You can just join.
Okay.
we've done it separately in the past. I know that's something I would like cleared up on the new zoning code,
Yeah,
just to specifically allow for us to have
yeah.
consecutive meetings.
Yeah.
And so we've just done it in the past.
So did we want to change this 5-year thing to 3?
That's up to y'all.
I think that's a good point you bring up. It's very generous, 5 years.
Yeah.
There isn't much work you have to do to get the plan district, it's really just put it in the plan and come to us.
Yeah, it really comes down to, it's the plat. The plat is typically, the plat is that first mechanism. So it really, you're giving them 2 years to submit a preliminary plat, pretty much.
Yeah.
And if they haven't done a preliminary plat by then, and I think Jacob's right, I mean, our preliminary platting requirements, based on what I've recommended to you guys, it'll be tough on some of the design things, but boy, we are super, super reasonable. The subdivision code that you and I wrote together, Mayor, like super reasonable compared. I mean, I deal with cities in Braunfels, Bernie, I mean, they want every single, the stuff they ask for just to get a preliminary plat in the door.
Right.
But you
But you could do the plan district with the plat stuff.
death by 1,000 cuts. And so this is, we're not killing people for the preliminary plat, the final plat, yeah, absolutely, you gotta have your drainage analysis and all that kind of stuff, but we are super reasonable.
Pending administrative completeness.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, can these run together with that?
Can
Can the plan development district run with because we allow for the approval pending administrative completeness, can this run with that?
no, they can do them at the same time.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love
If they feel, yeah,
So
totally.
they can go through the process, see it's even on the table.
Yeah.
And then we can do this right up front, let's figure out all the
Yeah.
conditions we want on
Yeah.
both sides, let's do this up front, get it going, and then you go spend $200,000 on
Yeah.
all your planning costs and everything that's sorted.
And again, going back to becoming developer friendly in certain ways, that's the way, back when I first started in the planning profession, people always link the closing to zoning, like if you had a piece of property that wasn't zoned properly and hadn't been platted obviously yet, the closing date was always linked to them getting the zoning. Now developers are linking the closing to the plat because they realize it ain't over till you get that plat, because they know how difficult cities are to work with. I mean, one little text dot thing, you can't get text dot to give you something, and so you're held up for 4 months and you keep having to extend it. With us, I mean, that preliminary plat submittal is pretty simple, so you can have that ready to go, and say you have a closing date for the 15th, you can get your zoning on the 1st or whatever, and then you can get your preliminary plat approved if you get everything in. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I guess then timing then, so we can't pass the planning district today, we can pass the rest of the chapters today, right?
Why can't we do the plan?
Do we have to post it like zoning? Do we have to do the zoning commission? Or can we pass it?
For the 3 chapters?
Just for this plan, does the plan development district have to go through zoning?
Yes.
So then can we do them in reverse? Like I know San Antonio will allow you to go to city council before zoning commission approval.
So if they could approve it tonight and then the next meeting is the zoning?
What's our existing zoning ordinance?
It's a month.
So typically, we have to do a 15-day, we have to send a notification to the newspaper in order to take any action on the PD. But on the rest of the stuff, this is not zoning stuff. This is subdivision related or water code related. So y'all can just adopt that without any hearings.
Okay, Do we have any further discussion? You want ready to take a break? So we're gonna bring it back in our meeting. And we'll decide which chapters we want to pass.
I don't have anything there.
Do you have anything else for a workshop?
I think we should pass it.
Yeah. So at our meeting, I like 6, 7, 11. I kind of shared my thoughts on 5 and 10. I like if we pass 5 and 10, I like passing it with the planned districts. That's on the table.
And point out the whole thing, we're gonna need it sooner or later.
Right, but so like if a developer comes in and the planned district gives us a lot more flexibility. It gives both sides more flexibility where they can say, all right, this, instead of having to go through a variance process, like look at the whole project. This specific item's not gonna work. So they can put in the planned district and we can approve it without that item. We can have, we can ask for more things. We can have a more flexible plan that works both sides.
But I'd say, the only thing I'd say is like, if you have a developer that's interested in, say, tomorrow, they're gonna come and talk to you, and you can say, if they're like, we get flexibility, you say, we're gonna pass this plan development district thing in 15 days, so it'll be there for them, so.
Hopefully.
Well, I can't, it's up to you guys, if you guys are generally in consensus that you want the PD district, there'd be no reason that it's not in place. And so, my concern is you could get an application on the Volner track tomorrow, and you have no leverage. So why would you want to leave yourself vulnerable for 15 days? Because if you get a development in, there's another one, So just, you guys always have the power. You always have the power to accommodate somebody. Like, you always have the power to accommodate the development that you want. By changing this code later, by getting rid of chapter 5 if you decide in 2 or 3 weeks, it's crazy. You always have the power to change it, but you don't always have the power to regulate a bad development if you don't have the codes in place. If they're there, you're always in the driver's seat. So I guess that's my recommendations. I can't see any reason why I wouldn't just adopt all of it and make sure you're in the driver's seat. You always have the power to accommodate good development, whether it be tomorrow or 15 days from now or 30 days from now.
If you approve this plan as it is, you can always make changes as needed.
Right. Yeah, and they can always come in for a variance.
Well, how come you only want 3 of those chapters done?
Because I just like it, the other ones that increase costs and can create some challenges, I think, for trying to attract the big developers. I like having the planned district there because it's a tool that they can rely on to have a more flexible plan.
Yeah, but we don't have any developers coming in,
Right, and I don't want to close the door to it.
so why not
That's,
make changes as needed? Huh?
yeah, we can if we can get them to the door. And if that's the route we want to go, that's up to y'all. Maybe my
What's your say here, Mr. Lawyer?
I'm looking to see if we can approve this tonight. I think the city commission has the authority to change it, but we may need to notice for zoning, amendment to the zoning code or addition to the zoning code. And if planned development districts falls under the zoning code,
Which it does. It's a zoning district. We're creating a zoning district.
so we all can do it. We don't need to go to a special zoning hearing because y'all have that same authority, but we will just need to post notice of the meeting at which we plan to approve that section.
So can't do it today.
Can't do the PUD today.
Okay, I think we're good for our workshop. We're gonna have our meeting at 6:30, and we can talk about it then. And that's when we could pass pieces of the,
We need something, because we don't know what we're gonna be here next May. We might have something in the books. So,
hopefully we'll have it all.
huh?
That'd be great.
There's
other chapters.
I don't want to be nothing stupid spending and blaming it on us, huh?
Yeah. Okay, any save rounds on our workshop? Are we ready we got 30 minutes till our next meeting?
I need to go get a windbreaker right now.
Yeah. I get hangry, so it's 6 o'clock. Go work.
I didn't think I'd check.
And that thing, I can see it moving.
Usually it's so hot in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
All right.
There's one coming in the window?
I
no,
shit.
no, I turned the air conditioner off, it was the air conditioner.
Oh,